I'm sure you've heard about it, that MediaTek is making a comeback and the best of Dimensity is better than that of Snapdragon. Today, we've got the POCO X4 GT with Dimensity 8100 to test out and see if it's the real deal. Let's get started. Selamat pagi! Good morning everyone, Kenneth here and welcome to my Tested by Ken Genshin benchmark, and all I can say right now is the POCO X4 GT. Very impressed. Now, before we start, my full disclosure is down below, which basically says I'm always giving you my own honest opinion. There's no point in doing otherwise. And also help me do more tests by using the affiliate links below if you want to buy any of these phones, so I'll get a small commission at no extra cost to you. And with that said, let's get right onto the testing here. So, as always, we're starting with 100% battery. I fully charged the phone beforehand, so this cable is just to maintain charge. The phone starts cool and the room temperature is about 29 to 30 degrees. And of course, all kinds of performance mode are turned on here. And also we can see the refresh rate on the top left, as well as the built-in performance monitor, which you can find on the MIUI developer settings in case you're wondering. A lot of you asked about it. And so starting off from the initial loading, counting from the moment the door opens until the world shows up, the POCO X4 GT finishes at 14.8.9 seconds. Not particularly impressive, but it is in the same ballpark as the POCO F4 I've tested before, which had Snapdragon 870 inside. Just to confirm, the settings are put at highest preset, only frame rate is set to 60 FPS, and one important tidbit I want to tell you is I always let the phone sit staring at the sky for about 1 minute before moving. This is done not only to see how quickly the phone heats up, but also to kick things up to gear, so we're testing the real performance in the long term, not just the first 1 to 2 minutes here. Alright, so immediately from the start, where we cross the bridge into the pathway here, the X4 GT impresses with its rock solid 48 FPS. Only until we get to the fighting part, then we start seeing drops to 44, 40 FPS, but that's about it. This makes the X4 GT play much smoother than the F4 or F4 GT that regularly jumps up and down into the 30s. The phone always keeps up with quick camera movements, which might still feel janky on the Snapdragon counterparts, and if we compare the temperature reading reported on screen, the phone is still relatively cool at 40 degrees compared to F4 GT that got closer to 42 degrees in my previous test. Now, moving on to the second fight here, it's even more impressive to see that Yelan's running skill didn't even affect the FPS in any way. It's a smooth sailing throughout the process, and the same cannot be said with my previous test. Especially on the F4 GT, it could be hard to control the direction. Even the POCO F4 had its performance affected, even though not as severely. Now, frame rate is still solid 48, flying down to the cab below, and even with much more enemies here, the X4 GT again proves that it can execute Yelan's running skill perfectly smoothly. Only until I threw in her burst as well as sucroses, and then we start to see some FPS fluctuation down to the low 40s. At one time there, it even reached 38, but only just that once. As the battle eases up here, we can see the frame rate quickly jumps back to the high 40s, and I just wanted to say that this is a much better experience compared to the F4 and F4 GT, which both phones actually stay longer in the 30 FPS range, which results in a choppier experience. Now, as we move on to the final battle here, I just wanted to highlight the temperature now that we are past 42 degrees. This is after playing for about 4 minutes, and we'll see how much hotter it'll get later. By the way, I don't have to mention the battle here because the frame rate is just a solid 47, 48, 49 throughout the battle, right? I mean, except for that one moment I used Radiance Burst, I got 38, but otherwise, that's it. Anyway, moving on to the Floor 9 Spiral Abyss here. Actually, I don't know if I should be happy or sad since there's nothing to talk about here. The phone gives out a solid 48 FPS performance again, although the temperatures kept on raising bit by bit here, but now I guess I'll let you enjoy the footage instead. Okay, now pay close attention to the temperature mark. Very shortly, we'll see the phone crosses 43 degrees and the phone decided to just, okay, it's time to dial things down, although only a little bit. So from this point onwards, we don't play at 48 FPS anymore, but instead, we're sitting around 44 FPS. Did 4 FPS make a difference? Honestly, no. I didn't even notice it until I saw it in the graph. Everything is still really smooth and consistent, and really no matter what happened, whenever I feel like, okay, this is gonna be it, it's going to make a dip, it's going to lag, not even a single second, I can see the frame rate drop below 40. Well, I mean, okay, actually there is one when I first dropped the Crow's Burst, but otherwise, nothing. Not Raiden's Burst, not Yelan's skill, not with however much small things happening on screen. It's a solid 40 FPS performance. I would argue this feels better than hitting a higher number, but also then goes low, which would introduce inconsistent frame time, which then causes that small lags that you feel happening here and there. Now, just to talk while you're watching the footage here, actually it's interesting to see that there is a 45 FPS option in the settings. And the phone is like purpose built for this thing, because based on the result that we've seen so far, I actually recommend you to use it instead of the 60 FPS, because the X4 GT can't even cross 50 FPS for some reason. This is something that I'm trying to investigate, even when I try to put the settings on medium or low setting, which I'm sure the chip would easily hit a stable 60. The only thing I got is more 49 FPS. So let me know in the comments if you have any insights to this. But yeah, finally, let's move on to the walking sequence now. So starting with Dragon's Vine, the phone is fresh out of the oven here, but surprisingly, it wasn't too hot at 43.7 degrees. We could still see the throttle taking effect here as the whole sequence is just 44 FPS. But then moving on to Liyue, the density of assets proves to be a bit more challenging here as the phone dropped once again to 38 FPS for a second, but then frequently stays at around 40, so it's not a stable 44. And then last but not least, Inazuma, when you climb up the stairs revealing the lights here, the trees, the crowd, you could see that it gets a little bit choppy as I move the camera left and right. So again, it's not what I can call a stable 44 FPS, but it's pretty alright and actually around the ballpark of what the POCO X4 can do with its Snapdragon 870. The test ended with 43 to 44 degrees top and 40 degrees bottom. Now let's break down the benchmark result we got courtesy of WeTest PerfDog here. And this is what I'm talking about when I say the frame rate is rock solid. You can see a clear trend line around 48 FPS until about 5 minutes in, and the phone reaches 43 degrees and then it throttles to 44 FPS and stayed like that until the end. Let's compare this quickly to the POCO X4 and you'll see why I always say the X4 GT feels better. Take a look at that. Especially on the world farming, the graph is all over the place. Also notice that this has much more blue and red spikes, which indicates that it has much more janks or simply stuttering. And if we take a look at the numbers here, we can see that the variance in both FPS and frame time is huge. Also notice that the X4 GT maintains frame rate over 25 FPS 100% of the time, and there are much less stuttering percentage in total. Plug all the data into my table and we can see why the X4 GT is superior despite scoring a slightly lower average FPS than POCO X4. And actually, Dimensity processors are nicely power efficient as well. As we can see, it only uses 4.2 watts on average, and as a result, playing for 10.5 minutes drained the least amount of battery compared to the Snapdragons, which results to about 3% of that X4 GT 5000 mAh battery. And we can see that the loading times are also slightly faster on the X4 GT. And I'm counting the in-game loading time while traveling through different parts of the maps, which we all do on day-to-day basis. So that's pretty much it for the test this time around. Actually, if we're going to compare the X4 GT to the F4, there's a lot more to talk about aside from the gaming performance, which is the screen, the build quality, the cameras and everything. So let me know if you want to see a video on that. And by the way, take a look at this. I just got this magnetic cooler that I'm going to test out on the F4 GT, and the result We'll see you on the next video, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one. Okay, that's pretty much it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, follow me on social media to see more content about all these devices and all the audio stuff that actually is waiting to be covered right here. But yeah, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Affiliate links are down below. And thank you so much for watching once again. I'm Kenneth, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.